Our first reading today is from Exodus. It's actually all of chapter 17. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages, as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people, and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah, test, and Meribah, quarrel, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the sun set. And Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a reminder in the book, and recite it in the hearing of Joshua. I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "A hand upon the banner of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Our next reading is from Psalm 105, the very beginning and the very end. There we go. O give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him, sing praises to him. Tell of all his wonderful works. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Seek the Lord in his strength, seek his presence continually. Remember the wonderful works he has done, his miracles, and the judgments he uttered, O offspring of his servant Abraham, children of Jacob, his chosen ones. He brought Israel out with silver and gold, and there was no one among their tribes who stumbled. Egypt was glad when they departed, for dread of them had fallen upon it. He spread a cloud for covering, and a fire to give light by night. They asked, and he brought quails, and gave them food from heaven in abundance. He opened the rock, and water gushed out. It flowed through the desert like a river. For he remembered his holy promise, and Abraham his servant. So he brought his people out with joy, his chosen ones with singing. He gave them the lands of the nations, and they took possession of the wealth of the peoples, that they might keep his statutes and observe his laws. Praise the Lord. Here ends our readings for today.
It's somewhat ironic that this week when I've been reflecting on the story of water from the rock, I've been thirsty all week. But first, a story. There was a quirky little TV series on Canadian television. It's done now. This family, this fabulously rich family, got taken advantage of by their financial consultant. And they lost everything. They lost their house, they lost their cars, they lost their planes, they lost their businesses. Except for this one asset. Which isn't quite how bankruptcy law usually works. Usually you at least keep your house, but they had one asset left. Probably because nobody else wanted it. At some point, as a joke, the father had bought his son a town. I'm not sure how you buy a town. But the father had bought his son a town. And it was the only asset they had left. So in this pilot episode, they all moved to the town. And it was not what they wanted. It was backward. They were living in what could charitably be described as a flea bag motel. The plumbing didn't work well. The one staff person was, well, she had customer service issues, as in she didn't really do it well. They didn't want to be there. Their needs weren't being met there. They thirsted, they yearned for what they had lost. The daughter was sure that her rich boyfriend was going to come and fly her away. That didn't happen. They spent years convinced that what they needed was to get out of the town and back to what was normal. But something happened. As they spent time in the town and had various adventures and misadventures, various attempts at starting a businesses, some successful, some, well, we'll leave those in the other pile. As they became a part of the community, to their surprise, their needs were met. And what they were deeply yearning for, they didn't even know until they got there. They became connected with the four of themselves. People who, parents and children, didn't really know each other's lives. In fact, the mother, Moira, often said in that first season, we don't really know much about your life, and underneath it was, we don't really care. But their needs were met. Their thirst, their deep thirst that they didn't even know they had, was met. And when the time came and the business ventures were taking off and most of the family was leaving, it was with great sadness, because the town of Schitt's Creek had become their home. Sometimes when we're in the wilderness and we're yearning for something, that thirst gets met in a totally different way than we expect. The Israelites were, I'm sure when Moses said, we're going to go find a rock, and I'm going to hit the rock, and you're going to get water. How would you respond if you're dying of thirst and you're mad at this guy who's led you out to the desert to die of thirst, and he says, I'm going to go find a rock, and God's going to provide you water? There is a legend that that rock follows the people of Israel for the next 40 years, so they always have water. There's another legend about Miriam's well. that Miriam's well follows the people around, so they always have water. Because whatever else happens in the story of Exodus, the underlying theme is God will provide what you need. No matter how much you grumble, no matter how much you complain, no matter how much you're sure that God has gone away, that you're alone, God will provide what you need. God will satisfy that deep thirst. You just have to open your eyes and look for it. Whether it's white, flaky stuff on the ground, which we call literally, what's this stuff? Or water from a rock. Or as is often shared in modern survivalism, water from a cactus. Because in the American deserts, you know which cacti to find. Almost every cactus is non-toxic. You can get water from cactus. God will provide what you need if you know where to look. If you open your eyes. If you trust. And that's important, that we remember to open our eyes and look and trust, because when our needs aren't getting met, do you remember the Snickers ads? Snickers made a whole series of ads, one of which featured Betty White, because at that point in time, Betty White was in almost everything. And it would start with one person incredibly cranky, complaining, whining. And one of the other people in the ad would hand the person a Snickers and say, "Eat something." Why? Because you're not you when you're hungry. When our needs aren't getting met, when we have that sense that there's something missing, something we deeply need, it changes who we are. It changes how we act. When we're deeply thirsty, we can only focus on that thing we're missing, that thing we're yearning for. I mean, lack of water also does things like puts us to sleep, makes us drowsy, makes us confused, and definitely grumpy, because dehydration headaches tend to do that. When we don't get what we think we need, we're different people. It's hard to be who God has formed us to be when we're sure that we're missing something. We're called to trust that God will meet our needs, sometimes in ways we don't expect. Water from a rock. Fellowship and renewed family from a small hick town living in a flea bag hotel. There are other examples of times when we were sure we needed this, and God provided this, but in a different way than we expected. And we ended up in a different place. We ended up in a different understanding of life. We ended up living differently because our needs had been met and our eyes had been opened, and we said, we're not alone. God's here. God's leading us to a new life. There's a new world somewhere they call the Promised Land. And I'll be there someday. If you just hold my hand, I still need you there beside me. Yes, it's a love song, it's a pop song, but it speaks to the way God works with us. Leading us to the Promised Land, helping to meet our needs, to fill our deepest thirst. There's a gospel story I think we need to tell in conjunction with water from the rock. It comes from the Gospel of John. Jesus, in the middle of the day, goes to a well near a Samaritan town. His disciples go on in his town to try to find food. And he's there alone, and a woman comes to the well. And they have a discussion. Jesus says, "Give me a drink." And she says, "Why dare you talk to me? I'm a woman, I'm a Samaritan, you're a male Jew. Why are you talking to me?" And they debate a bit. And Jesus says, "Whoever drinks from this well will be thirsty again. Whoever drinks of the water I have to give will never thirst again." And she, taking him quite literally, says, "Well, tell me where this well is." We follow the one who promises to assuage our deepest thirst so that we never thirst again. Even if we're in the midst of the wilderness, even if we're in the midst of hostile territory, even if we're sure we've been lost and abandoned, we follow the one who says, "I've got something for you to drink. I'm going to meet your needs, and you'll never thirst again." That's our hope. That's what leads us through the wilderness, is the promise that we're not alone. The promise that our needs will be met, that we'll get what we deeply need. It may not always be what we want. I have a whole different sermon on the difference between needs and wants. It was drilled into me as a child. It may not be how we think it's going to come. It may not be what we want, but our needs will get met. That's the promise God offers. Our needs will get met. We'll travel through the wilderness. We'll come out the other side to new life, to new hope. That's the promise. May God give us the ability to trust, to have our eyes opened, so that the water will flow. Our thirst will go away. Thanks be to God, who offers all these things, even if it's the middle of a wilderness, even if it's in hostile territory, or even if we find ourselves living in a flea bag hotel in a town which nobody really wants to name out loud. Amen.